It's the moment election nerds across the globe have been waiting for. 538 has at long last released their official polling averages for the 2024 presidential election cycle. Let's fill out a 2024 electoral college map based on these aggregates of all the polls taken so far in the battleground states. But first, because I know you're also probably curious about national polls, let's take a quick peek over at their national head-to-head polling average between Biden and Trump. As of April 27th, Trump leads Biden by 0.8%, a very narrow lead that he has consistently held over the incumbent Democrat since they began tracking surveys in early March. Specifically, their average shows 41.7% of likely voters would support the former Republican president if the election were held today, while 40.9% would support Biden and 10.2% would support independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The range of outcomes, or uncertainty levels, represented by the red and blue shaded areas around each of these lines, are kind of like a weather forecaster predicting, say, 1 to 3 inches of snow in an upcoming storm. The most likely outcome may be 2 inches, but it could be as high as 3 or as low as 1. And right now, that interval here for the polling average shows that there is a 95% chance that Biden's support right now is anywhere between 39.4% and 42.2%, while Trump's range is from 40.3% to 42.8%. I should also note that this is actually the first set of interactive polling averages that 538 has released since founder and editor-in-chief Nate Silver left in May of last year, with G. Elliott Morris, formerly of The Economist, now the director of data analytics at 538. Morris has introduced a new methodology for their averages, which you should feel free to check out on their website. But as always, these averages do account for each poll's recency, sample size, methodology, and house effects, among other things. Now, before we get started on their swing state averages, though, let's first fill out all of these safe states for Biden and Trump. Starting with the Democrat, we have Washington, Oregon, California and Hawaii, Colorado, Illinois, New York, Maine's 1st Congressional District, Vermont, Connecticut, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, D.C., Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. And for the states that Donald Trump will definitely win, we have Idaho, Utah, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota, Nebraska's at-large statewide contest, as well as the 1st and 3rd congressional districts, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, West Virginia, and South Carolina. Each of these states went to Biden or Trump by margins greater than 12 percentage points in 2020, and we have no reason to believe at this point that they won't back the same candidate by a comfortable margin once again here in 2024. Now, with these states allocated, Democrats, Joe Biden, have 191 to 122 electoral college vote advantage. That being said, there are also quite a few more competitive states in which 538 has not yet released an average, probably because there are not enough polls to have generated one up to this point. Those that lean towards Biden include New Mexico, Minnesota, Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and then up in the Northeast we have New Hampshire and Maine, its statewide contest. Each of these states and district backed Biden by at least 6 points in 2020 and have not voted Republican since at least 2004. For Trump, on the other hand, Maine's 2nd Congressional District is likely Republican, as are the states of Iowa and all the way down here, Alaska. All 3 voted for Trump, also by at least 6 points in 2020. So that leaves just 10 states with 180 electoral votes between them, in which 538 has generated a polling average for 2024. Biden continues to hold a preliminary advantage with 226 electoral votes to Trump's 132. That gap will close pretty quickly, though, here, as we take a look at the states with a strong amount of lean towards Trump. Starting in Florida, 30 electoral votes up for grabs here. Trump leads Biden by 9.9 points, almost exactly 10 points, with 47.1% of voters expressing support for Trump as compared to 37.2% for Biden and 8.7% for RFK Jr. Now, that is nothing short of a remarkably large margin of lead for a presidential race in Florida, especially for those who have paid very close attention to presidential elections over the last few decades. In fact, no presidential candidate on either side has carried Florida by more than 6 points since 1988, the longest such streak in any state. I bet if you were to ask a random group of people on the street to name a swing state, Florida would likely be one of the most popular answers. That's probably no longer going to be the case, though, once all of the votes are counted this November, as it has certainly taken a hard shift to the right in the last 2 election cycles. Trump won by 3.4% in 2020, making it one of just 8 states where he actually won by a larger margin than in 2016, and both incumbents in 2022, Governor Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, both Republicans, were reelected by 19 and 16 points, respectively. And such a strong pro-R shift is reflected here on this average, which translates over to another likely Republican margin for Trump on this map. Over in Texas now, very similar in margin to Florida right now, Trump leads by 10.1% according to 538, with Trump at 46.2% and Biden at 36.2%. Kennedy again comes in at about 8 to 10 points, at exactly 10% actually. That's another likely Republican rating over on the map here in the Lone Star State, awarding 40 more electoral votes to Trump. That's 70 electoral votes added to his tally from just Texas and Florida alone. Remember, though, that Trump's 5.5-point margin in 2020 in Texas was the narrowest for a Republican presidential candidate here since 1996, and Texas has outpaced the national trend towards Democrats by 10 points since 2012. But it does appear that the continued shift of Hispanics, particularly in Texas, down here in the Rio Grande Valley, in favor of Trump and the Republican Party, has at least temporarily put a halt to Democrats' momentum in the state. Now, our third and final likely Trump state is Ohio, another 10-point margin of lead for Trump, this one by 9.6% though, as he holds 45.3% of likely voters to Biden's 35.7%. Trump has led in every single poll taken in Ohio so far this cycle, and by at least 10 points in each of the last 4. Gone are the days in which Ohio commanded the nation's attention on election nights. It's still a hugely important state for Republicans. No GOP presidential candidate has won the White House without winning Ohio, but it's no longer the key tipping point state that it once was, as Democrats have pretty much taken it off their target board. So again, that means that Ohio joins Florida and Texas as likely GOP on the map, launching the presumptive Republican nominee, Trump, all the way up to 219 electoral votes, now just 7 behind President Biden's 226. And so that leaves just these 7 states widely considered to be the only true battlegrounds this election cycle. 93 electoral votes are shared between them, and they were each decided by less than 3 points in 2020. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania up here in the upper Rust Belt region, and then Georgia and Arizona down in the Sun Belt, each backed Trump in 2016 before then flipping to Biden in 2020. Nevada, meanwhile, backed Hillary Clinton by 2.4 points in 2016, and then backed Biden by that exact same margin in 2020. That said, since Biden won the national popular votes by a greater margin than Clinton, that actually means that Nevada became more Republican compared to the rest of the nation since 2016. North Carolina, on the other hand, voted for Trump by almost 4 points in 2016, 3.7%, and then his lead shrunk to just 1.4% in 2020. Again, though, since the national environment became about 2.5 points more Democratic in 2020, North Carolina actually remained pretty static relative to the nation. Now again, with Biden at 226 electoral votes and Trump at 219, whichever candidate secures the right combination of these states' electoral votes will win the presidency. Remember, 270 is the magic number needed to be elected president. So let's go through these states then by greatest to narrowest margins of lead. One interesting trend that we have been seeing is that Trump has consistently polled better in the 4 Rust Belt states of North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada than he has in the Rust Belt trio of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Trump's widest margin of lead right now is in Georgia, where he leads Biden by an average of 6.3%, 45.6% to 39.3%, with Kennedy down at just 7.2%. All 7 polls that 538 has included in this average here shows Trump leading, with the overall lead of 6.3%, meaning that over here on the Electoral College map, again, we can place Georgia as leaning towards Trump. For qualitative rating classifications in this video, margins between 2 to 7 points are lean, while less than 2 points in either direction are noted as tilt. 7 to 12 points are the likely states here. Now remember that Georgia was the closest state in 2020. Biden won it by just 0.2%, making him one of just 2 Democrats to carry the state since 1988, the other being popular Southern Democrat Bill Clinton in 1992. And even he lost Georgia in his re-election year in '96. Keep in mind as well that as recently as 2012, Mitt Romney had defeated Barack Obama by 8 points, meaning that Georgia has seen a significant leftward shift over the last decade, an 8-point trend, actually, as a matter of fact, the 5th strongest pro-Dem shift of any state in the nation compared to the rest of the nation. Nevertheless, obviously Georgia has strong conservative roots, and if Biden is unable to turn out the vote in Atlanta's rapidly diversifying suburbs, like he did in 2020, he's going to have a very hard time retaining the state as Trump looks to win back dominant support in Georgia's strong Republican rural areas. Now, the next state is actually Nevada, as Trump has been consistently beating expectations in poll after poll here in the Silver State. His current lead over Biden sits at 6 points exactly, with 43.2% to the incumbent Democrats' 37.2%. This is one of just 3 states, the others being North Carolina and Michigan, in which Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has already claimed ballot access. One thing we should note here, in all of these averages actually, is how low both Trump and Biden's level of support is across these states, with neither candidate reaching anywhere close to 50% in any of these competitive states actually. And the reason I'm making note of this is because even if Kennedy does manage to make the ballot in every state, we have historically seen prominent third-party bids tend to fade down the stretch of the election cycle, as more and more voters ultimately fall in line with the 2 major party candidates once they get closer and closer to actually entering the ballot box. If that were to happen here in 2024, where Kennedy's support goes will be a major question with potentially significant implications. Not to mention, if RFK doesn't even qualify in any of these major states, these hypothetical vote shares will cease to exist, leaving potentially 8 to 10% of the vote up for grabs, more than enough to flip the outcomes in these highly contested battlegrounds. Anyways, back to Nevada, Trump has led in every single one of these polls. Added to the average here, he led most recently by 8 points in this latest survey from Bloomberg and Morning Consult, a lead that actually increases to 11 points when RFK Jr. was included. And again, the independent does have ballot access in Nevada. And as we go back to the map, Nevada will join Georgia as leaning Republican. Now, there have been signs in recent years that the GOP would become more competitive here in 2024 as they flipped the governor's office in 2022 and came within a point of unseating a relatively popular incumbent Democratic senator. But even beneath the surface, Trump's emerging strength among Hispanics seems to be playing a key role, as Nevada is roughly a third Hispanic. It's also one of the fastest growing states in the nation, with a large majority of those moving to Nevada from California, particularly to Clark County, home to Las Vegas. Clark is home to almost 3/4 of Nevada's population, making it by far the single biggest factor in winning the state. Now, the hospitality workforce in Clark County is highly unionized, and the unions are used to flexing their political muscle almost always on behalf of Democrats. So the issue in every campaign cycle here, actually, including 2024, is less about whether Clark County will vote Democratic, but whether its Democratic vote will be sufficient enough to carry the party statewide. In the past 4 presidential races, Democrats have won Clark County by enough votes to ensure a statewide victory. Though, as we said, in 2016 and 2020, the statewide Democratic wins have been extremely narrow. In 2020, Biden won Clark County by about 10 points and the state by 2.4 points. The concern then, ultimately, for Democrats, is to what extent the party's base will come out and vote to re-elect Biden in November, as polls continue to show a lack of enthusiasm among key demographic groups crucial to the incumbent's chances. With that said, the silver lining for Biden is that Nevada is relatively meaningless in the grand scheme of things, at least in the race to 270. Even if he does lose Nevada, its 6 electoral votes are highly unlikely to swing the election in either direction, especially as compared to states like Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. Even Wisconsin and Arizona are far more likely to be the tipping points. A similar thing can actually be said over in North Carolina, where yes, there are 16 electoral votes at stake here, but since Trump lost the Electoral College in 2020, he simply can't afford to lose any of the states that he won in 2020. Out of the 7 battlegrounds, North Carolina voted the furthest to the right in 2020 and the second furthest in 2016, behind Georgia, making it highly unlikely that Trump would flip enough states to hit 270, but then somehow lose in North Carolina, giving Biden a second term. It is interesting, though, that Trump's margin of lead over Biden in North Carolina is actually narrower right now than in both Georgia and Nevada, 5.4% as of April 27th, with Biden at 39.7%, actually his highest mark of any state so far. But do keep in mind that polling in North Carolina has consistently underestimated Republicans. Clinton and Biden both led in the final polling averages headed into the election, before ultimately losing to Trump. And Democratic Senate nominee Cal Cunningham also led Republican incumbent Senator Thom Tillis in almost every single poll taken during the 2020 Senate race in North Carolina, only to end up losing by 2 points. All in all, Republicans have won 7 consecutive federal elections in North Carolina, those being Senate or President, as we go ahead and mark North Carolina as leaning Republican here as well. Our next state is Arizona, where Trump's lead is down to just 3.5 points now, and I say just because Trump actually led by a margin of around 5 points throughout most of March and into April. So this is actually the former president's narrowest margin in Arizona since 538 began tracking their polls. Trump is at 43.2% to Biden's 39.7%, with RFK Jr. at 9.7%. In contrast to North Carolina, Democrats have actually won 4 straight federal elections here in the Grand Canyon state, as well as the most recent race for governor. The GOP had previously reigned supreme at the presidential level in Arizona over the last 60-plus years, winning 16 of 17 presidential elections between 1952 to 2016. That said, their dominance began to be challenged at the start of the 21st century, culminating in a narrow Biden victory in 2020, as Arizona has rapidly trended towards the political center in American politics, driven primarily by the GOP's losses among college-educated voters, rising turnout from Latinos and Native Americans, and the explosive population growth and diversification of Maricopa County, encompassing Phoenix, the fastest-growing metro area in the entire country. And like Clark County in Nevada, Maricopa in Arizona is the single biggest factor in determining statewide elections here, as it houses roughly 2/3 of Arizona's population. Biden became the first Democrat to receive the most votes in Maricopa since 1952, actually making it the largest county in the country to vote for Republicans prior to 2020. The split in 2020, 50.3% to 48.1%, and Biden's Bravo lead of 45,000 votes, was just enough to overcome the slight Republican edge across the rest of the state to help Biden win by about 10,500 votes, 49.4% to 49.1%. I do get the feeling that the 2024 race in Arizona will be a significant litmus test, not necessarily for the 2 candidates themselves, but rather voter opinion between 2 hotly contested issues: immigration and abortion rights. During the first 4 months of fiscal year 2024, Border Patrol in Arizona recorded more than 250,000 migrant apprehensions in the Tucson sector, the most of any region patrolled by the agency. Meanwhile, a court ruling in Arizona earlier this month revived an abortion ban from 1864. So while Trump and the Republicans will try to make every effort to frame the 2024 race on the issue of immigration, the Biden campaign will look to make it all about abortion. We'll see how it plays out. For now, Arizona goes down as a leaning Republican based on Trump's 3.5-point polling advantage. So that leaves us now with the Rust Belt trio of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. These three states proved decisive in 2016. Had Hillary Clinton managed to hold them in the Democratic corner, Trump would never have been elected president. And then in 2020 as well, had Trump held off Biden, he would be serving a second term right now. They will be equally important here in 2024. As we take a look at the electoral count, Trump only reaches 268 electoral votes, too shy of 270, with a sweep across the Sun Belt, meaning that he will need to at least win one of these Rust Belt states to secure a minimum of 270 electoral votes. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania have traditionally been part of the blue wall, voting blue at the presidential level in 6 straight elections between 1992 to 2012, before Trump broke through in 2016 thanks to his emerging support among white, non-college educated voters in the region. The same emerging strength that made states like Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, and Missouri go from Obama-era swing states to now firmly Republican. Biden did flip the 3 states back in 2020 thanks to Democratic appeals to college-educated voters, particularly suburban women who had turned on Trump since 2016. Now in 2024, it's anyone's guess as to how they will vote next. On the one hand, Democrats have overperformed up and down the ballot in all 3 states since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. But on the other hand, confidence in the economy remains very low, with most of the blame headed in Biden's direction. That's especially a concern for the incumbent in this region, as he will be counting on turnout among the large numbers of suburban, working-class voters here that swung in his favor in the backlash to Trump in 2020. As of recording this video, Trump leads Biden by 3.2% in Michigan, 42.8% to 39.6%, with Kennedy, who is qualified here, again remember, at 8.9%. Now this is a notable jump actually in favor of Trump over the 1.1% lead he held just a few days ago, a jump that comes off the back of this latest outlier poll from Kaplan Strategies, showing him in front by 15 points. Over in Wisconsin now, Trump leads Biden by just 1.2%, with 42% to Biden's 40.8%. This is the first time that we're actually seeing an average in which Biden had led at some point over the last 2 months. He actually led by just a few tenths earlier this week, in fact, before again this Kaplan Strategies survey showed Trump with an unusually large advantage. And then finally, over in Pennsylvania, a very similar lead for Trump here, 1.1%. Biden had led in the first 3 surveys added to this average a while ago, but Trump has now led or been tied with the Democrat in every poll since. 43% of likely voters are backing him right now. Over on the electoral map, though, this means that while Michigan goes down as leaning Republican, Wisconsin is tilt Republican, and Pennsylvania is as well. Overall, this means that based on the latest polling averages from 538, former Republican President Donald Trump would be elected to a second non-consecutive term in the White House with 312 electoral votes to Biden's 226. This is not at all an unfamiliar electoral vote distribution, as polling has remained remarkably consistent across these states, leading to this 312 to 226 count that we've seen in most analyses over the last few months. For those of you out there who are looking for more drama or action with changing electoral counts every video, I fear you are not likely to see anything like that until at least the late stages of the summer, which is when we'll start to get more polls as pollsters pick up the pace, hopefully leading to more interesting analyses down the road. That is all though for this analysis. You can feel free to comment your thoughts and feelings about this map in the comment section below. I appreciate all positive or negative comments. Also, make sure to let me know down there what other 2024 related videos you would like to see in the future. Shout out to my channel members on screen here. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to become a member, go ahead and click the join button below this video to receive exclusive perks. Make sure also to subscribe to my channel down below, and please leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.